In this video I'm going to go over the top winter camping questions I get, and I'll lump those into 3 categories. Genuine curiosity, person thinks I'm a liar, person thinks I'm an idiot. Let's start with this one, an easy one. Why can't you see your breath if it's so cold? It's minus 10 out right now, and I'll show you what I mean. Nothing. I think it has to do with relative humidity, but I really don't understand the science behind it. All I'm saying is I'm not lying. Next question is similar because people think I'm lying about the temperature when they see water or slush on top of the lake or even elsewhere, open streams. Snow is a great insulator, so if you have lots of snow, several feet of snow perhaps, on top of open water, it'll stay liquid. It won't freeze just because of snow's insulating power. That question is a good segue to the next one, which is why do I collect liquid water instead of just melting snow? Snow is all around. People say, why are you drilling using the auger to get water from the lake? I know that there's snow everywhere. I can see it too. But you have to pack in snow into a kettle or a pot, and even if you pack it as densely as you can, you're probably going to get 20% of the volume of the container of actual water once it melts down. Then you got to go out and pack in more snow into that water, and it's just not a nice process. Not to mention, snow is full of debris unless it's really fresh snow. So it'll have pine needles in it, snowshoe hair droppings perhaps, bird droppings. Liquid water from the lake could have fish pee and poo as well, but highly diluted as opposed to potentially scooping up a bunch of snowshoe hair poop just under the snow that you didn't see. Next one, what is the temperature inside the hot tent? I often show the temperature outside. So I've had this sitting right here beside me for quite a while, just to make sure it's leveled off, and it's about 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's probably a good representation, but it varies so widely. It's kind of a hard one to answer, because the top of the tent could be 40 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit more or less, and the floor could be freezing, because the ground is an endless cold source, right? And the heat rises from the stove. So there's a huge disparity, and it also depends on how quickly you want to burn up your firewood. If I open the dampers and let this thing rip, then it can get really hot in here. 40 degrees Celsius for sure. But if I want to conserve my firewood, which I do, because it's hard earned out here, then I'll usually use it slower. But even 10 degrees Celsius is much nicer than minus 10 outside or minus 30 outside. Sometimes I get asked a much more fundamental question. Why winter camp at all? That looks awful. It looks like so much work. It is a lot of work, but it's incredibly beautiful. I just had a wonderful day out here in fresh snow. Nice temperature for hiking through it. Winter here in northern Ontario, Canada is about 6 months. I mean, there's snow on the ground for 6 months. November through May, you can expect snow, even into October. So you have to embrace it. Otherwise, it's a miserable half a year. And with the right gear, winter can be so enjoyable. You don't have to have a hot tent and a wood stove, though that is, in my opinion, the nicest way to enjoy it. There are tons of ways you can enjoy winter. Why aren't you wearing snowshoes is a question I get a lot. And the reason is I'm probably on a packed trail, a packed snowmobile trail, for instance, which is hard. I don't need snowshoes, and snowshoes add strain to your leg muscles, so there's no need to use them if you're not sinking in. Or I'll just go without them for a short distance sometimes. Or consider that I'm filming. I'm trying to illustrate the depth of the snow sometimes, and sinking in is an effective way to demonstrate that. How do you poop when it's that cold out? It's a good question. When it's in the minus 30s, if you wake up in the morning and you have to go, it sucks. It really does. Like, you feel like you're gonna lose your fingers by the end of it. Anyway, the process is to find somewhere well away from any streams or water source or trail or campsite. Way away. You can only do this in wilderness areas like I camp in, but you can leave your poop there. Animals poop all over the place, so don't worry about that. As long as you've gone somewhere where no one's gonna set foot again, that's not an issue. The toilet paper is the issue. The poop will go away quickly, but there's nothing nastier than coming across a wet pile of TP in the spring. This can either be burned on the spot if you poop beside a big birch tree with lots of bark, like so. You can just create a small fire there on top of the snow with some twigs, incinerate your TP, or if you have the stove going, if you're camping with a wood stove, bring it back and incinerate it in your stove. Speaking of the stove, I'm often asked, aren't you afraid of carbon monoxide? Yes, but I carry a carbon monoxide alarm, battery powered, but this has to be kept, I'm told, well off the ground to work properly. And its operating temperature is, I think, like 4 degrees Celsius. So it has to be kept to a reasonable temperature. If the stove's going, it should be able to do that fine. but if it gets too cold, it might not work properly. It shouldn't happen. Someone might tell you, oh, no, I've been camping with hot tents and wood stoves my whole life, never had an issue with carbon monoxide. Do you want to stake your life on that? I don't. Another one about fear. Aren't you afraid of animals attacking you in winter? We have black bears here, lots of them, but they're in a state of torpor in winter. It's very unlikely to see one. I don't think I've ever seen a black bear in winter, though, like most things, Murphy's Law, if it can happen, it will happen. And they do come out sometimes, but it's extremely rare, and I would say that's more likely to happen if there's a known food source around, like if there's a garbage dump that they can break into. Then they might have a reason to get up, but a bear in the wilderness has no reason to get out. There's no calories to be found. Wolves, I've never heard of a wolf attack in this area. Again, we have wolves, we have coyotes as well. I've never heard of it happening. There are also cougars, though very rare. One was spotted on trail cam here last winter, and it was a big deal because it's so rare. So that's not really something to worry about. Aside from that, unless a moose decides he doesn't like the cut of my jib and mows me down, there's nothing to worry about with animals in the winter. However, I do carry bear spray in the summer, and a lot of people say that they wouldn't do this without a gun. That's fine, but I can tell you from my experience and the experience of a lot of camping veterans I know in this area, that's totally unnecessary. If it gives you comfort and you're legally allowed to, go for it. Next one, how do you keep filming equipment charged? I carry 1 or 2 20,000 milliamp power banks along with many extra batteries. And a lot of people will ask, why don't you use a solar charger? I own one. It's really not practical to bring out here. In the winter, there's often cloud cover and very low angle sun, so you're not going to get much juice out of that. And most power banks or receivers for that energy can actually be charged in cold temperatures. It'll damage the batteries, so that's really only a summer option. But even in the summer, I use the same setup because I have to buy all these batteries for winter. I might as well just use them in summer and not have to trouble myself with setting up a solar panel as I travel each day. Another thing that gets people is when they see snow on the ground. There's no floor to this tent. A traditional canvas tent like this has no floor, and you can use spruce boughs, for instance, to line it, but it's not strictly necessary and it's higher impact, so I often don't. And if I'm camping on a spot that might get used frequently, then I definitely won't use spruce boughs. It's not necessary. As long as I have an insulated sleep system, which I do, closed cell phone pad and a sleeping mat, then you really don't have to. It can get slippery in here, especially as the snow gets melted by the stove. There were some ferns outside still for some reason, and I grabbed some of those and threw them down as like non-slip mats, and that works perfectly fine. Some people have these Russian bear tents or whatever, and they have an insulated floor built in. Those tents are way too heavy for me hauling in on foot. People use foam tiles, much lighter, but still very bulky to cover 80 square feet, 8 by 10 tent, and this is my smaller tent. So I just get by without it. It's not an issue. Could even just use a tarp, which doesn't take up too much room, but then embers fly out of the stove, or I track in snow and it melts and then it's pooling in a tarp. Nice thing here is everything just sinks down into the snow or earth. Anyway, those are some of the most common questions I get. If you have any others, just let me know. Hopefully this satisfied your curiosity, or if you think I'm a liar or a fool, hopefully you don't anymore.